I was at my desk finishing my morning appointments when she walked in, the kind of quiet entrance you barely notice until it becomes unforgettable. Most clients arrive with folders, IDs, utility bills, something that says, "I'm here to open an account." She came with nothing but a calm, almost deliberate expression, as if she'd already decided how the entire conversation would unfold before I even greeted her. I remember looking up from my computer screen and saying, "Good morning, I'm Philip Harwood. How can I help you today?" My voice carried the same polite tone I'd used 1,000 times. Routine, predictable, safe. But what she said next gently pushed my day off its tracks. "I have an appointment to open a new account," she said. Her voice was soft, steady, and slightly detached. Not rude, just focused, as if she wasn't here for banking at all. I gestured for her to sit. "Of course, let's get started. May I have your ID, please?" Instead of reaching for a purse, she slid a sealed envelope across the desk. A plain, cream-colored envelope with no markings. I hesitated, blinking once, twice. "Ma'am, this isn't—" "It's for you," she said, and her gaze locked onto mine with a sincerity that felt strangely personal. "For me?" I repeated. I even gave a small, awkward laugh. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." She leaned back slightly, as if physically distancing herself from what was about to happen. "You should read it when you're alone." I looked down at the envelope, then back at her, trying to read her face, her intentions, her emotions, anything. But she didn't offer a single clue. "Is this related to an account issue?" I asked. "It's related to you," she replied. And with that, she stood up. The appointment was barely 60 seconds old. She didn't give me a name, didn't ask for forms, didn't behave like any client I'd ever met. She simply straightened her coat, offered a polite nod, and walked toward the lobby as if she were leaving a courtroom after delivering a verdict. I sat frozen for a moment, unsure whether to call security, laugh it off, or chase after her to ask what on earth she meant. But the envelope was right there, and curiosity, quiet, stubborn, insistent, pulled harder than my professionalism. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature. Just one message, handwritten in dark blue ink. "In the next 7 days, you must make a choice. Choose the hardest one." I read it again, and again, then a fourth time because none of it made sense. Was it a prank? A mistake? Some kind of bizarre social experiment? Spokane had its share of eccentric people, but this felt intentional. I stood up, looking through the glass wall of my office as she reached the exit. She paused before pushing the door open and looked back, not at the room, not at the bank, at me. Her expression wasn't threatening, but it wasn't casual either. It held a weight I didn't understand yet, a silent message that made the air in my office feel slightly heavier. And then she left. I sat back down, envelope still in hand, feeling an odd mix of irritation and unease. I tried to return to my appointments, but the message stayed with me, circling my thoughts like a slow-moving storm. I didn't know it yet, but she hadn't delivered a warning. She had delivered a countdown. And the first sign that the week ahead would be anything but normal appeared less than an hour later when my supervisor stepped into my office with a new policy that would change everything.
I tried to pretend the envelope meant nothing. I tucked it into the top drawer of my desk, told myself it was just an odd moment in an otherwise ordinary day, and forced my attention back to the schedule. 3 more morning appointments, a staff meeting, and a call with headquarters. But the strangest things have a way of sticking to you. Even as I greeted my next client, even as I nodded and processed forms and answered questions, that message pulsed somewhere under my skin. In the next 7 days, you must make a choice. Choose the hardest one. By 11:30 a.m., I was almost convincing myself to forget the whole thing. That's when my supervisor, Mark Peterson, knocked on my open door. Mark didn't knock unless he wanted something, and the smile he wore, tight, rehearsed, managerial, meant whatever it was wouldn't be good. "Philip, got a minute?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Of course." He closed the door behind him. Never a good sign. "We're rolling out a new policy," he said, opening a red folder and sliding one page toward me. "It's effective immediately." I skimmed it once and felt my chest tighten. The policy was simple, cold, and blunt. Clients with certain risk flags, late payments, inconsistent deposits, outstanding overdraft history, would face immediate restrictions on account access. No exceptions, no extensions, no grace periods. In Spokane, those flags didn't belong to criminals or scammers. They belonged to retirees living on fixed incomes, to small business owners juggling seasonal cash flow, to people doing their best in a world that rarely gives them breathing room. "This will hit a lot of our older clients," I said carefully. Mark shrugged. "Corporate wants efficiency. We're bleeding resources on accounts that aren't profitable." I looked at him. "Mark, some of these people will lose access to their funds with no warning." "That's the point. It'll motivate them to keep their accounts healthy." I stared at the paper, my jaw tightening. "Some of them can't." Mark's smile flattened. "Philip, don't start. This is above us. All you need to do is apply the policy. If someone complains, redirect them to customer service." I chose my words slowly. "But customer service can't override this." "Exactly," he said. "We stay clean, they take the hit." He stood, smoothing his tie. "Headquarters is tracking compliance branch by branch. Don't get creative." He tapped the page twice with his finger, a polite gesture with the weight of a warning, and walked out of my office. I sat there for a long moment, the envelope from the woman feeling suddenly heavier in my drawer. Choose the hardest one. But I didn't want to think about that. I forced myself back to work. At 1:10 p.m., an elderly woman approached my desk. I knew her, Mrs. Dalka, 78, widow, Romanian immigrant, always polite, always careful with her small pension. She held her passbook in trembling hands. "Philip," she said softly, "my card stopped working at the grocery store. They said my account was frozen." My stomach dropped. I pulled up her file. The system displayed a red banner across the top. "Account restricted, risk category 2, no overrides." Her risk? A single late utility payment last month and 2 unusually large heating bills. "I need to buy my medicine today," she whispered, embarrassed. "I don't know what happened." I swallowed hard. "It's a new policy," I said gently. I'm going to see what I can do." She looked at me with trust I didn't deserve. Trust the policy didn't care about. When she left, without a solution because the system wouldn't allow one, I sat there in silence, the failure burning deeper than I expected. I felt angry, not at her, not even at Mark, at myself. That envelope in my drawer felt less like nonsense and more like a mirror. Choose the hardest one. At 3:42 p.m., I went to refill my coffee in the break room, trying to clear my mind. A group of coworkers stood in a small circle, whispering. When I stepped in, they stopped talking. One of them muttered, "He's going to hate this policy. Just wait." Another said quietly, "Orders from the top. He can't fight it." I stood there a moment, listening to my own name float in the air like a warning. And then the thought slipped through me, soft but unsettling. What if that woman didn't deliver a message? What if she delivered a prediction? By the third morning after receiving that envelope, I had almost memorized the handwriting without meaning to. The loops, the pressure of the pen, the slight rightward tilt. Every time I opened my drawer for a pen or a form, the note stared back like it was waiting for me to answer a question I didn't yet understand. But life didn't stop because of a cryptic message. The new policy was hitting clients hard, and every hour felt like triage. People were confused, humiliated, desperate. I was doing everything the system would allow, which wasn't much. Around 10 a.m., I heard someone clearing his throat at my doorway. When I looked up, I recognized him instantly. "Mr. Harwood? It's me, Tom Preston." Tom Preston, mechanic, late 50s, ran a small auto shop off Francis Avenue. His father had opened that shop. He'd inherited it, along with the debts and the loyal customers. He was the kind of man who worked with his hands and apologized when he shook yours because of motor oil stains. I stood. "Tom, it's been a while. Come in." He stepped inside, hat in his hands, eyes tired in a way I hadn't seen before. I didn't know who else to come to," he said quietly. "I think I'm in trouble." I gestured for him to sit. "Tell me everything." He took a breath that shuddered on the way out. "I think I've been scammed, real bad." What followed was a story that made my stomach twist. Fraudulent invoices, unauthorized withdrawals, a loan request he swore he never signed, and now collections letters threatening to seize his shop. His father's shop. His legacy. "Tom, why didn't you come sooner?" I asked gently. "I didn't want to be a burden," he said. "My wife always said I worried too much. But yesterday the bank sent me a notice about irregular activity, and I figured if anyone would tell me the truth, it'd be you." That hit deeper than he realized. I pulled up his account. The screen populated with alerts, dozens of them, fraud indicators, suspicious transactions, a flagged document that should have triggered an internal investigation weeks ago. But it hadn't. Because of the new policy, cases like his were being deprioritized, less profitable, too much manual review. Tom leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Am I going to lose the shop?" Something tightened inside me. Not anger this time. Resolve, maybe. "Not if I can help it," I told him. He exhaled shakily, relief flickering through the exhaustion. Then he said something that made the hairs on my arms prickle. "A woman came by the shop last week, asked if I'd ever worked with you, asked what kind of man you were." My pulse stumbled. "What woman?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tall, dark coat, spoke nice, said she might need to talk to you soon, asked about your reputation." He frowned, searching my face. "Is something going on?" I felt the room shift, slowly, subtly, like the floor had tilted a few degrees beneath my chair. The envelope. The note. The woman leaving the bank without looking back. I opened my drawer. The envelope was still there, its edges crisp, and its presence now undeniably intentional. "Tom," I said carefully, "did she give a name?" "No, just said she was checking something. And she told me," he brows tightened, "she told me you were going to face a big decision soon." The world around me went strangely quiet, like the bank had been placed under a glass dome. "Did she say anything else?" I asked. Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah, just one thing." He looked at me with a mix of confusion and worry. "She said someone was running out of time." My chest tightened. Time? 7 days. And suddenly the problem wasn't the envelope. It was the countdown I hadn't realized was already halfway over. By the 4th day, I stopped pretending any of this was normal. I hadn't told anyone about the envelope, not even coworkers I trusted. Some secrets feel too strange to say out loud. And the more I tried to ignore it,
the more the week kept twisting itself into something I couldn't quite explain. Every morning began the same way. A knot in my stomach, a drawer I hesitated to open, and the quiet fear that whatever choice the note referred to was getting closer whether I was ready or not. And in Spokane, winter light moves slowly. Gray, heavy, lingering over everything like a silent witness. That Wednesday started with a series of small things. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and say, "There, that's the moment everything changed." But when small things happen all in the same direction, you notice. A client I'd known for years came in crying because her disability check had been flagged and delayed. A young father couldn't withdraw money to buy diapers. An elderly veteran shouted at a teller out of sheer panic when his account locked without warning, all because of the new policy, all because someone behind a distant desk thought numbers mattered more than people. Each time I heard the same helpless phrase, "You know me, Philip. You know I'd never do anything wrong." And what made it worse was that they were right. I did know them. Spokane isn't a big city. Our branch served generations of families. These were people whose weddings I'd seen photos of, people who brought cookies during the holidays, people who'd cried in my office when life took a bad turn. By noon, I was exhausted from watching lives crack in real time. But the signs weren't only coming from customers. Around 1:30 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, no one spoke. Just slow, steady breathing. Then the line went dead. An hour later, the receptionist stopped by my office. "Philip, a man just came in asking what time you leave today. He didn't give a name." "Did he say why?" "No, just left." I tried brushing it off, but her face said she didn't believe her own explanation. Spokane isn't the kind of place where people ask about your schedule unless they know you. As the day went on, more oddities piled up. A car idled across the street for nearly an hour, black SUV, tinted windows. When I stepped outside to check the ATM area, the SUV drove off slowly, like it hadn't expected me to look directly at it. By late afternoon, the air inside the bank felt different. Staff whispered in corners, some glanced at me with concern, others with caution. I didn't know if it was my imagination or something shifting beneath the surface of the branch. I tried focusing on Tom Preston's account again, digging deeper into transaction logs the system didn't show at first glance. Something was wrong, very wrong. Several withdrawals were linked to internal access points that shouldn't have been touched. Whoever was responsible wasn't outside the bank. They were inside. When I left for the night, the sky was already dark. Spokane winters steal the light early. I walked to my car, breath fogging in the cold air, scanning instinctively for the SUV. It wasn't there. For the first time in a long time, I felt watched. That feeling stayed with me until Friday evening. I came back from refilling my coffee and found my office door slightly open. Just a sliver, but I hadn't left it that way. I stepped inside slowly. Nothing looked out of place at first, until I saw it. On my desk, placed perfectly centered on the keyboard, was a sticky note. Just one sentence. "Check on the Preston case. They're not done with him." No signature, no explanation. But the handwriting. It was the same handwriting from the envelope. The countdown wasn't just real. Someone was making sure I didn't ignore it.
By the morning of the 7th day, I had given up trying to convince myself any of this was coincidence. I didn't believe in omens or fate or mysterious strangers who delivered warnings like something out of a novel. I believed in numbers, in bank policies, in procedure. My whole life was built on structure. But structure didn't explain the envelope, or the note on my desk, or why Tom Preston's case looked worse each time I opened it. And it definitely didn't explain what happened at 9:12 a.m. The branch was quiet that morning. Spokane winters tend to slow people down. The cold presses against the windows, the roads stay half frozen, and our first wave of clients usually trickles in after 10. I was reviewing account flags again, trying to find a way around the new policy for Mrs. Dalka, when I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. A man in a gray overcoat stepped through the glass doors. He wasn't a client. He wasn't dressed like one. He moved with purpose, with the kind of confidence people get only from authority or bad news. He approached the front desk. Then the receptionist pointed directly at me. He nodded and began walking toward my office. The room seemed to shrink around me. "Mr. Howard?" he asked, stopping in the doorway. "Yes," I said, standing despite the heaviness settling in my chest. He reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope, official, stamped, heavy. "My name is Officer Reynolds. I have a court notice for you. I was instructed to deliver it directly into your hands." Court notice. For me. My first thought was absurd, that this was somehow related to the mysterious woman. My second was worse, that it was about the bank's policy, that someone had filed a complaint. I took the envelope slowly. "Is there a problem I should know about?" He hesitated. Just a fraction, enough to unsettle me further. He said, "The person who filed the request said you'd understand when you read it. That's all I was told." The same phrase the woman had used. "It's for you. You'll understand." A chill crept up my spine. "Thank you," I managed. He nodded, turned, and walked out with the same quiet authority he'd arrived with. I closed my office door. My hands weren't shaking, but they felt cold. The envelope sat on my desk like something alive. For a moment, I just looked at it, thinking of Tom, of the handwriting on the anonymous note, of that black SUV parked outside, of the woman's last glance before leaving the bank. Whatever this was the moment it became real. I broke the seal. Inside was a formal court order requesting immediate access to internal banking records tied to fraudulent activity. The case number matched the irregularities I'd seen on Tom Preston's account. But that wasn't what made my breath catch. At the bottom of the form, under Petitioner, were two initials, L.H. The same initials written on the sticky note left on my desk. The same initials the woman used when she signed the visitor log the day she walked into the branch. My pulse quickened. She hadn't disappeared. She had been watching. She had been following the case, and she had known exactly when to send a court officer to my door. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the order pressing into my hands. This wasn't a warning. It was the moment the note had been preparing me for. 7 days had passed, and the choice I had to make, the hardest one, had finally arrived.
I must have read that court order a dozen times. Every word felt sharp, deliberate, impossible to ignore. It wasn't just a request for information, it was a demand for truth. And the truth, in this case, was buried under layers of internal access logs, missing documents, and decisions corporate didn't want anyone digging into. The order gave me legal authority to release the records immediately. The bank's policies forbade it. One path would save an innocent man's life's work. The other would protect my job. 7 days ago, that sentence seemed ridiculous. Choose the hardest one. But now it was sitting in my hands in the form of a court seal and a man's livelihood hanging by a thread. I closed my office door, locked it, and sat down with my head in my hands for a long moment. If I complied, I'd be challenging the same senior leadership who'd just spent the week pressuring us to enforce a policy they knew was wrong. Men who had more power than integrity. Men who didn't like being questioned. If I refused, Tom Preston would lose the shop his father built with his bare hands. The fraud would continue, and whoever was behind it, someone inside the bank, I was now almost certain, would walk away untouched. The envelope from the woman seemed to pulse inside my drawer, as if reminding me I had already stepped into this path without realizing. I opened it again. Choose the hardest one. Sometimes the hardest choice isn't heroic. Sometimes it's simply refusing to look away. I exhaled slowly, stood up, and walked toward the elevator that led to the executive floor. Not to confront them, not yet, but to notify them formally and professionally that I intended to comply with the court order. The hallway felt longer than usual. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. The elevator doors opened with a metallic sigh, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the third floor. My heartbeat steady but heavy. When the doors slid open, I froze. Two senior directors, Gary Benton and Wallace Pierce, were walking out of the conference room holding a file folder with my name printed on the tab. My personnel file. They stopped when they saw me. Gary was the first to speak. "Philip, we were just about to call you upstairs." Wallace's expression was tighter, scrutinizing. "We had concerns about your resistance to the new compliance directives." I felt something shift inside me, a line I didn't know I'd been standing on. "Is that my file?" I asked quietly. Gary didn't miss a beat. "We're reviewing your recent performance. There have been reports you're taking too many liberties with discretionary decisions." Meaning, I'd shown compassion. I'd tried to help people. I wasn't the machine they wanted me to be. Wallace stepped closer. "Before you do anything impulsive today, remember that corporate is watching. Any deviation from the new policy is grounds for disciplinary action." He didn't know about the court order yet. He didn't know the law had bypassed their policy entirely. He only knew I was standing on a line and he intended to scare me back into place. But fear wasn't the force moving me anymore. I felt strangely calm. I'm complying with a lawful order. Immediate release of the records tied to the Preston investigation. Silence. Gary's eyes widened slightly. Wallace's jaw clenched. "You don't have the authority to do that without—" "I don't. The court does. And they handed the order directly to me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway felt narrower, the air colder. Wallace stepped forward again. "Philip, if you do this, you're putting your entire career at risk." I held his gaze. "I know." Gary shook his head, almost disappointed. "You're making a serious mistake." I thought of Tom's exhausted eyes, of Mrs. Dalka's trembling hands, of the woman in the dark coat who looked at me like she already knew who I was before I did. "No," I said softly, "I'm making the hardest choice." Their faces hardened, and as I walked past them toward the office where I would fulfill the order, I felt something subtle but undeniable. Fear leaving my body, conviction taking its place. But just as I reached for my office door handle, someone called my name from behind the counter. "Philip, a letter just arrived for you." And when I turned, the envelope in her hand bore the signature I had been waiting for 7 days to see.
I knew the moment I turned that envelope over in my hands that my day wasn't going back to normal. My name was written in a neat, deliberate script across the front, the kind of handwriting belonging to someone who thought through every detail, someone who didn't make mistakes, someone exactly like the woman who had walked out of my office 7 days earlier. I carried the envelope back into my office, closed the door gently, and just stood there for a moment. It's strange how quiet a bank can feel when you're the one being watched. I could sense the tension outside, whispered conversations, glances over partitions, footsteps slowing when they passed my door. News travels fast in a branch, especially when the directors walk around carrying your personnel file like a warning flag. I sat down and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No court stamps this time, no legal formatting, just a handwritten message. "You chose the right side.
Now be ready for what comes next. LH. I stared at the initials for a long moment. LH, the same ones on the sticky note, the same ones the court officer referenced, the same ones left in the visitor log. Whoever she wasn't guessing what would happen next. She was anticipating it. And she was right. Everything began falling apart before lunchtime. Gary Benton called me into his office first. He'd always prided himself on being calm, rational, professional. Not today. Today he sat stiffly behind his desk, fingers steepled, a tightness around his mouth that made every word feel like a reprimand. "Philip, corporate is very concerned about your interpretation of procedures," he began. "Interpretation?" I repeated. "I followed a lawful court directive." "That's not the issue," he said sharply. "The issue is your judgment. You should have come to us before releasing anything. You know how this looks." "How it looks?" I said. "How it looks is that we've been ignoring fraud in our own system." His eyes flickered, just briefly. That was all I needed to know I had touched something true. "We're opening an internal investigation," he said. "Until further notice, limit your client interactions. And do not, under any circumstances, discuss the Preston case with anyone. Are we clear?" I nodded, because arguing wouldn't change anything. But as I walked out, I heard him mutter to Wallace, "He's becoming a liability." A liability? For helping a man who'd done nothing wrong? For following the law? For living up to the oath I took when I became a manager? To protect clients, not exploit them? Word spread fast through the branch. Some coworkers looked at me with sympathy, others with caution. A few avoided eye contact entirely. By mid-afternoon, HR emailed me requesting a mandatory meeting at the end of the business day, the kind of meeting where careers quietly end. Still, I didn't let myself panic. I spent the next few hours gathering the documents the court order required: internal logs, flagged transactions, timestamp trails. And the further I went, the clearer it became. The fraud wasn't random. It was orchestrated, systematic, and impossible without someone inside the bank, someone above my level. At 4:45 p.m., as I was finishing the legal packet for the court, a courier arrived with another envelope, my name again. The receptionist brought it straight to my office. "It looks urgent," she said softly. I opened it. Inside was a copy of an internal email thread, an internal conversation between two senior directors dated 3 weeks earlier, discussing the handling of Tom Preston's flagged account. One line stood out, underlined in red ink, clearly added by the sender. "They plan to let his business fail. You weren't supposed to see this. LH." Her full name. My chest tightened. She wasn't just watching. She was fighting from the outside what someone on the inside was trying to bury. And she had placed me right in the center of it. As I set the paper down, I heard a firm knock at my door. "Mr. Harwood?" It was the HR manager. "We're ready for you now." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of everything settling on my shoulders. The consequences had arrived, but so had the truth. And the next step would reveal exactly why Lydia Hartwell had chosen me.
HR had prepared the small conference room like they were staging a formal goodbye. 2 chairs facing one another, a folder waiting on the table, a glass of water no one intended to drink. I'd seen this setup before. Employees called in after performance concerns, only to walk out with empty boxes. But this time, I felt a strange steadiness inside me, as if the choice I'd made had rearranged something deeper than fear. The HR manager, Karen McGill, sat across from me. She looked uncomfortable, like she'd been asked to deliver a message she didn't agree with. "Philip," she began gently, "you're aware that the directors have raised concerns about your recent decisions." "I'm aware, though I assume they didn't mention the court order." She hesitated. "They did. Of course they did." Karen opened the folder. "They're recommending disciplinary action due to what they're calling a breach of internal protocol.
I kept my voice even. A lawful court order overrides protocol. Her eyes softened. I know. For a moment, she closed the folder and lowered her voice. Off the record, Philip, there's something happening upstairs. Something bigger than you. I don't think you're the problem here. I think you're the obstruction. The word landed hard. Obstruction. That meant they had a plan, and I had gotten in the way. Before she could continue, there was a sharp knock on the door. A security officer leaned in, handed Karen a paper, and whispered something too quietly for me to catch. Her expression changed. "Philip, you need to come with me." We walked down the hallway, past curious glances and half-closed office doors, until we reached the lobby. There, standing by the entrance in her dark coat and calm posture, was the woman from 7 days ago. The woman who had handed me an envelope instead of an ID. The woman whose handwriting had guided every step of the last week. Lydia Hartwell. She looked exactly as she had that day, composed, deliberate, but now with something new in her eyes. Relief. "Mr. Harwood," she said softly, "thank you for agreeing to speak with me." Karen stepped aside, confused but cautious. "Who exactly are you?" Lydia reached into her coat and pulled out a badge. Private investigator, contracted by the Washington State Attorney General's office. The air seemed to shift around us. She turned to me. "I'm sorry for involving you the way I did, but I needed to know if you were the kind of man who would follow the law even when it cost something. The kind of man who wouldn't look away. I couldn't risk choosing wrong." Every knot in my chest pulled tighter. Choosing for what? She nodded toward the offices upstairs. "To assist with a state investigation into fraudulent lending practices tied to 2 senior directors at this branch, Gary and Wallace." My pulse steadied. "You knew?" She said. "I suspected, but I needed someone on the inside who was honest, someone who wouldn't warn them, someone who cared more about people than profit quotas." Tom's face flashed through my mind, Mrs. Dalka's trembling hands, every client hurt by the new policy. "You left the note," I said quietly. "The reminder on my desk?" "Yes," she admitted. "I couldn't contact you directly without compromising the investigation." I exhaled slowly. "And the choice?" Her voice softened. "The hardest choice is always the one that asks who you really are when no one's watching." Security stepped forward as 2 agents walked past us, heading straight toward the director's offices. Lydia touched my arm lightly. "Because of the documents you released, the case goes forward today. You saved Tom's business, and you helped uncover a scheme that would have ruined countless people." Karen stared at me, stunned. "Philip, you were right, all along." For the first time in days, the weight on my chest loosened. Lydia offered a faint smile. "I'll be in touch. You're not finished with this yet." She walked away as quietly as she had arrived, and yet, everything around me felt different. The bank wasn't just a place of routine anymore. It was where I'd learned who I was, where I'd made the hardest choice, and where, for the first time in my life, doing the right thing finally meant something larger than myself. I looked down at the now familiar handwriting on the final note in my pocket and read it one last time. "You'll face a choice. Choose the hardest one." I had, and it had changed everything.